Welcome to Dolby Creator Talks. This is a show about how artists use technology to tell their stories, and I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Today we're discussing The Sound of Tuner. It's the new film from Academy Award-winning filmmaker Daniel Roher. I saw it a few months ago at the Telluride Film Festival, and immediately I knew that I wanted to have it on our show. Not only because it has a truly spectacular track, but also because sound is instrumental to the plot of the film. So I'm thrilled to welcome back for his third appearance on Dolby Creator Talks, our good friend Johnnie Burn, who is the film's sound designer, supervising sound editor, and re-recording mixer. And we have something really special today. Joining Johnnie and me in conversation is the star of the movie, Leo Woodall, who plays Niki, a piano tuner with a debilitating hearing sensitivity that just so happens to make him an expert safecracker. We were able to get a few minutes with Leo during the film's press junket and then have a longer conversation with Johnnie. I think this is the first time we've ever had the star of a movie on the podcast and conversation about the sound design. But if you've seen the movie, you know why this is the right movie to have that conversation. To give you a sense of Leo's work in the film, here's an amazing scene near the beginning of the movie between Leo's character, Niki, and Ruthie, played by Havana Rose Liu, as she tests his perfect pitch.
Do you have perfect pitch?
Yeah.
What's this?
E. G. C. A flat. E flat. B flat.
Close your eyes. You're cheating.
A, B. C, F sharp. A flat, E. E7 flat 9. F7 sharp 5 sharp 9. F sharp, G, A sharp, B over D sharp. C major 7 sharp 11, B flat 13, F sharp minor 7 flat 5, E7 sharp 9, G minor 11, E major 7 sharp 5, D sharp minor 7 flat 5, and C sharp major triad over an open E minor triad. The Strauss electric chord. See ya.
Nice.
Well, since it's such a treat to chat with the star of the film about the sound of the film, I wanted to start this interview by asking Leo about what kind of research he did on the condition of hyperacusis and whether or not that's what initially drew him to the role. Here is actor Leo Woodall.
There were many things that made me want to play Niki. I think, I had great empathy for his sort of suffering and his pain and his loneliness because of his condition and how that's affected his life. But the way it's woven into this film of sort of kind of many genres, I finished it and I just immediately wanted to watch it. I just knew that it was a film I wanted to see in the cinema, and that's always a good sign for me.
Did you do any kind of research on the condition hyperacusis, and did it inform your performance? I feel like Niki watches so carefully the world around him, but he's almost like a little bit removed. So I'm curious, like, was it your understanding of how his hearing worked that kind of led that part of the performance?
Yeah. So the first thing I did once Daniel and I had decided to do this together was he put me in touch with a guy called Alex Ruger, who has lived with a condition for I think over a decade, and he talked to me at length with incredible honesty and openness about how it affected him, not just physically, but how it affected his life, how it affected relationships in his life, and for me that was incredibly informative on how Niki would kind of just navigate his day, how the weight of his loneliness and his resentment was really informative, and then going out into the world and like actually taking real note of how loud life is and how loud the world is, and just thinking about him and trying to not, take it all for granted anymore.
That first moment when Niki tries to crack Harry's safe, he takes his hearing blockers out, and the sound of his world completely changes. So did you have any sense of what Johnnie was going to do with the sound of the film and what Niki's world was going to sound like?
No, and I have to embarrass Johnnie now when I'd say that the way his work elevated this film when I finally saw it was astounding. It really blew my head off. I knew that there was, there were marked beats for these moments. So I kind of just had to be considerate of them. And I think, that often came down to how close the camera would be as well. And basically doing whatever Daniel told me to do. But this I didn't know how you as an audience member could get so into Niki's head until I saw the final cut.
Well, just how you played a character who has such sensitivity to so many, incidences of brutal sound, but underplayed it so well that it was not, knowing what line to take with not being too reactive. So I think everything I was doing was just taking the lead from what Leo was doing, really. And
wow, that's very exciting.
Right back at you.
This is what you get when you get two Brits sat next to each other.
This is very unusual, Johnnie, for you to be, have a conversation like this with the lead actor of the film. What's this experience on this film been like for you, and to have this kind of dialogue with Leo as the film is coming out into the world?
Well, I mean, it's it's wonderful to see it through from a cycle of how a film normally works. Often I'll get involved at the stage of script and discussing ideas, rarely get invited to the shoot more than, come for a day or two, but try not to get in the way too much because we're making a movie here. And then, putting it together. But obviously this is a film where it was really important to understand precisely what your character was up to and feeling and experiencing. So yeah, very satisfying. Is that? I don't know if it changes the outcome of the movie itself, but I think understanding how Leo was playing this character was key to how I did the bit with the ears.
Yeah, I did the bit with the ears. I'm curious what stage you are able to start work on it. I mean, because I imagine during the shoot they might send you some dailies or something, but is it helpful to at least, do you start work before there's even an initial first cut?
Oh yeah, no, I mean, like as soon as if you're like me, you get annoyingly like, oh, I wonder if what that would. So I spent a couple of days with microphones in my ears walking around so I could go and listen to what it was, the way that, how your brain dials out a lot of things that there's an air conditioning thing and there was a phone ring 2 minutes ago, but mostly you just sort of dial it out. And so if you can actually record that and then play it back, that's quite informative of the kind of sounds that for this particular character might actually be quite intrusive and noticeable. But it turned out when I listened to that, I just mumbled a lot of swear words is what I discovered about myself.
Really?
More than anything else.
Well, just for no reason.
We're just bumping into shit or fuck. Or whatever.
That's good. That's very good.
So that moment towards the end of the film where Yuri tortures Niki by blasting the air horn in his open ear, just like the agony that registers on your face, Leo, is so real and immediate. How did you get yourself there? What were you imagining that Niki was experiencing?
Well, I'd already gone through the fire alarm scene, which have you been in a big screening with everyone in the room yet?
Yeah.
I remember when that fire alarm goes off, I remember so many gasps from the audience.
It's because it's funny with this particular condition that some conditions aren't based on sound or image, but here in a cinema, you can actually demonstrate what the condition is kind of like to some degree, because you can play sound so loud that you're like, holy shit, that's powerful. That's painful.
And it's I think it was also a sign that people were really engaged and they were sort of on tender hooks a little bit. But anyway, I'd kind of, I said to Johnny before we started, the sensation of the pain I'd kind of imagined as like a white hot sharp needle going through your eardrum, and that was the kind of the baseline. So when we finally did that scene where your ears blasting it in my ear, I think we kind of wanted to capture a sense of, he has never felt more pain or anguish in his life, and so he's kind of just submitted to it. He's almost, almost kind of passing away from the pain. The one-handed piano was just being at drama school, and there's pianos everywhere because people are just singing and dancing all the time. And I loved the instrument, and I wanted to learn how to like play my favorite songs or favorite scores. But yeah, the training for this movie was extensive. Both Havana and me had months of piano training, hours every day. I knew I would never get to the level of Niki. That was naive to think that, which I did actually think at the beginning. I thought, wow,
Whoa.
I'm going to be.
I've got a couple of months.
I've got a couple of months. I'm going to unleash, open doors for a whole new career after this. But
did you think about actually cracking safes as well?
Hey, I'm not going to say that on air.
Okay, we can't talk about
that. I can't talk about that on air. But yes, it was really important to me. Having been so moved by it in the script and been so drawn to Niki and the way that, it's, you're kind of, everyone alludes to this guy being this like special, generational talent. And, you're kind of teased throughout the whole film about what this kid can do. And I just thought it was incredibly satisfying and moving and exciting when that final scene is taking place. And I just knew that it was up to me for you to get that payoff. If you don't get the payoff, then, it kind of affects everything that's just happened. So that, yeah, it was important to me.
Leo, I think that's the end of our time, but I really appreciate you coming on that Dolby podcast today and talking about, because sound is so important for this film, and the experience is just fantastic.
Oh, well, I have to really shake your hand, Johnny. If you don't know, listeners, we are sat next to each other. And it's just a pleasure to get to talk about it and give Mr. Johnnie Burn his flowers.
Oh, thanks, buddy.
Thank you. I'll see you.
See you later.
Yeah, I'll see you later. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Leo. Johnny, I'm curious about what your initial conversations were with Daniel Rohr about the film and about the sound design. Now, obviously, this is kind of an interesting thing because this is his first narrative film. He's an Academy Award-winning documentary filmmaker and also had a pretty amazing documentary about AI that's out in theaters right now. So what did he tell you about how he wanted the film to sound, and at what point did you come on board?
He sent me the script before the shoot, I think it was maybe August, September 24. And I read it, and it was extraordinary actually, because when I was reading it, I was like, whoa, I've had this. Like, I actually had an experience when I was 19 that I had this, I had a water bottle. I wedged a water bottle under a kitchen tap, and the thing blew up because I left it for like an hour. It was like under ring main pressure or something. Anyway, I went 100% deaf, fortunately for about 20 minutes, not for forever. But when my hearing came back, I suffered to some degree an acute form of hyperacusis that went on for about 6 months, where I was allergic to loud sounds basically, and it was painful and very difficult. And anyway, but it did make me think, gosh, I think I know what to do here, Daniel. I can explain it, and it's extraordinary as well for a film that it's a disability that you can display through sound directly by playing sound too loud in a movie theater, basically, and for a short period of time, momentarily, to demonstrate kind of what that feels like. So I understood that, and so on a technical level, Daniel and I discussed, how we would present this condition, but also, not only that, it's a film that uses sound in music, dynamically to, for the love story and but also for the plot and the story points and we discussed how Niki's hearing would be initially perhaps like a sort of superpower, really, having the ability to hear in such detail, and then the downfall of these awful moments where it becomes too much, kind of thing. So yeah, I would say there was a lot to discuss in reading the script, but it felt like a good script to read, I can tell you that.
I remember you telling me about that experience that you had when you were 19. I'm sure that really informed. First of all, it must have made you very excited about working on this film and telling the story.
Well, it did. Well, I mean, at the time, what it did was it made me drop out of my business degree and go and get a job working in sound as an apprentice sound person, because I was like, that's my passion, and I nearly lost it. I stood in my bedroom. I can remember playing Public Enemy out the speakers and feeling it do that, and thinking, at the time, because I assumed that my hearing had gone forever, so I had lost it. But so marrying that with reading the script 30 or 40 years later or whatever was quite an experience. Yeah.
We've talked about this, but one of my favorite ways to use sound design is to give the audience the subjective POV that the main character, and this is served up to you on a platter with this film. Yeah. It's just like a perfect example of that. So what was your process for figuring out what Niki's hyperacusis was going to sound like, and then how did you execute it?
Weirdly, I always try, even if a film isn't POV, I think there is always an amount of subjectivity, because the film is always about someone. Usually it's a story about a human. And so I think you can always place the viewer, every piece of sound you put on a film is a choice above the kind of production sound. So if you have people talking about something sad in a kitchen, you could choose a refrigerator hum that had a melancholic tone to it. You could even create a chord structure that was melancholic. So, or you could have a major chord and it would be, dominant. And so you can always do subjectivity. But here, it was much more overt. The opportunity is to let the audience know very clearly that not just a subtle manipulation is going on of the soundscape, but that you are really hearing this condition the way that this guy is. And I think the main thing about that was that just to play stuff loud all the time would have got a bit boring and one note. And so really it was more that throughout the film, throughout Niki's subjectivity, you're making the point that the subtle stuff and the really quiet and normal things are actually almost weaponized for this character. The
major plot driver of the film is that Niki's incredibly acute hearing allows him to crack safes, but so he goes off on a life of crime, but ultimately for good reasons, of course. But tell me about your approach to those safe cracking scenes, because they're really interesting and fun, and I'm sure that the way that Daniel kind of visualized those sequences unlocked some things for you from a sonic perspective.
They were so much fun, and because they're so satisfying, because the kind of onomatopoeia of the sound effects in it, the way that it's a click, click, crunch, 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 and then it ends with a satisfying ding, so to create that kind of journey, I don't know what it is. There's something really, rewarding about listening to that. And I used, because, as a kid, beat construction, hip hop beat construction was always something I really enjoyed doing. And so I approached it a bit like that, how to make one sound fall after the other and be pleasing to the ear and create rhythm. But, and that was all, I went to visit Daniel and we discussed stuff during the shoot, and they'd finished all the safe scene. And Daniel gave me a big bag full of all the lock mechanisms and all the safe mechanisms. And all I had was a hand luggage bag, and I had to go and buy another suitcase to get it home.
I was probably overweight as well, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, it was extraordinary. It was really weird. Like, what have you got here, sir? And, but anyway, I took them home and I recorded them with a conduction mic. So rather than just airborne sound, a microphone that magnetically sticks onto the thing you're recording and feels the vibrations. So you get a much more depth of clarity and a much bigger response in the kind of bass frequencies and the higher frequencies, well, everywhere. So yeah, it was make some great recordings of lock mechanisms and shape them like little pieces of percussion and work out how to make a rhythm out of those that work with the picture and had a satisfying resolution to it.
So many big sound moments in the movie, but I also loved some of the really subtle work that you did in the track. One of the moments that stood out for me was when Niki goes over to Ruthie's apartment to dry out her piano after it gets soaked. And then, she's trying it out. After he fixes it, she's trying it out, and they're sitting there and she plays the piano for him. The mix really subtly changes. You can almost feel Niki falling in love with her, and then they go in for the kiss. Tell me about that really subtle moment and what you did there.
So it's about the contrast, but when they are first in the apartment and they're taking the piano apart, you hear the windows open in the background, which to a sound designer is, manna from heaven. It's like, woo, we can have all the sound coming in. But you do hear cars passing and you hear voices in the street. And as the camera moves around, the perspective of that shifts into the surround domain. And so the soundscape is very immersive and very alive. And simply, as you see him falling in love, it's about the removal of that sound, which I think, on a subtle level puts you into his headspace or shows focus. And but it's, there's the brain really trusts sound because images, obviously I'm a sound person, but I know that images you process and it takes you like 150 milliseconds for an image to go in your eye, optic nerve, into the thought part, and then you think about an image. With the sound, it goes into your brainstem and you react in like 10 milliseconds. So whenever there's a contrast between picture and sound, you trust the sound because it's the bit that your brain is programmed to believe first. And so the removal of sound is somewhat disconcerting, but also enabling from a point of view of story point, of what is this guy feeling, yeah.
Well, and you talk about contrast and dynamic range, and so the moment right after that really beautiful, subtle moment is the moment that Leo was talking about, which is when the fire alarm, the smoke detector goes off because Ruthie forgot that she was cooking dinner. And so the smoke detector goes off, and it's just torturous for Niki because he has all of his hearing stuff out. He's just vulnerable to that. So, tell us about that. That's really the first time that we get a sense that sound is dangerous for Niki. So talk about, crafting that sequence. And then you also made a great comment, which was, because of cinema sound, you're able to give the audience a little bit of the experience that Niki's having, but you also don't want to go too far. So tell me about sort of maintaining that balance. Yeah,
it's a real balancing act. It's like that fire alarm is the pitch of pretty much a human baby crying, which is the sound that the ear canal is programmed, is genetically made to hear best for obvious reasons. So that's why you can really kind of poke people with a fire alarm sound. But it's before that, we've in the film when we see Niki sit at the traffic lights and we see the motorbike go past, and he puts the ear defenders on, and so through that we learn the language of the film. But it's not here until here that we actually understand, the danger. And there is again the removal of sound there, and that's what creates even more of a juxtaposition. And that's what when things get silent, not only does your brain start to imagine sounds that are probably better than anything I could put in a film, so that's good because it's personal to you, but also your hearing opens up. And so there is, unfortunately, because we made it quieter before, we make your ears lean in, you probably physically lean in a bit. And then because this film is about a person with super sensitive hearing, momentarily we ran the sound at a very high level where, it is initially like, ouch, that's pretty kind of, and the attenuation of exactly what that sound was doing was something that we went backwards and forwards on quite a few times, because at that level, tiny changes of 1 or 2 decibels make an enormous difference to something going from enjoyment to wow, get me out of here. I'm running tonight because we're watching it on Pier 57 in New York with people listening on headphones, and I'm wondering if they're going to throw their headphones off at this point because they will be able to, basically.
And to Leo's point, I had the same exact experience, which is the first time when that smoke alarm goes off, the audience has a total reaction to it because you do create such a moment out of it from a sound. And it just made me think, from a sound nerd perspective, it's sort of like, once again, grateful for digital systems because you would not have been able to do that on an optical soundtrack.
No, you wouldn't get the volume, would you? No, it was good. But I'm glad Daniel was brave to to go for it.
Tell me a little bit about working with the music in the film. You've got some iconic jazz masterpieces like Take 5 and that amazing cover of It's Almost Like Being in Love by Dean Martin. And then you've got a great score as well.
Herbie Hancock, yay.
Who's in the film as shows up as himself. It's amazing. It's an amazing thing. So talk to me about the music and working with that against your sound design.
Yeah, I mean, the music is an enormous part of this film, isn't it? It's from the piano tuning point of view and from, Ruthie's journey through her music that she writes and performs. But the score is Will Bates's fantastic pieces that work on so many levels. They sing to the jazz, but they also, there are elements of Will's score that are beautifully metallic and percussive and sound like a safe, and they work on those moments to heighten the tension in a way that the marriage with sound design is extraordinary. And Greg O'Brien, the picture editor, I have to shout out to him because his understanding of how the music worked across the film and how the sound design moments and how the POV progressions and on and off with the was an enormous part of the soundscape and the musical soundscape of the film as well. But yeah, I basically never had so many music tracks on a film on my mixing desk because, but it's interesting how they all, I think it's probably Will's score, but it all sounds like the same world, doesn't it?
And I had made a note to myself as I was watching the screen, like the score is so lush in Dolby Atmos. You opened it up and kind of used the room for the score in a way that I thought was really delightful.
We were given so many different tracks that you could, with Atmos, you can spatially place things so specifically. And to have like 40 tracks of, even the castanet kind of as an individual element that you can stick in the ceiling or whatever was, yeah, we were lucky. It was good.
One of the big sound sequences in the film that I knew I wanted to talk with you about is the heist scene at the house under the approach for the Newark airport. And now, of course, after a couple of weeks ago, we know how low those planes actually get when they're coming into the Newark airport. That sequence is just so amazing to me. And there's so much contrast in it as well. You have a great POV moment towards the end after all hell breaks loose, and then Niki's, again, his earplugs are out, and you get that close up with the fish flopping around on the floor after they shoot out at the fish tank. To just talk about your approach to that scene, because it's also quite lengthy, so you have to build it and take us on a journey without becoming too much for us.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? You have like key dialogue that you have to hear, and you have these enormous planes going over that actually occupy weirdly more sort of sub bass than the traditional sound of a plane, because you've got kind of the roof in the way. But definitely that was the hardest scene in the film, and we were still working on it on the final day of the mix, basically, because there are so many elements, and the hearing condition factor and when we are and are not in Niki's POV creates makes the journey far more complex, basically, whether or not we are the subjectivity, which particular subjectivity we're in. But yeah, and you have the crucial dialogue between the characters, but there are also the background gangsters who are chatting away as well, and we need to know in amongst all of that what Niki is hearing and when the planes are going to come over and when everyone has to be quiet. So, yeah, very complicated bit of mixing, but it was great to be able to have Dolby Atmos to throw the plane over the heads.
Yeah, the plane was right over the head. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to just dig a little more into what you're talking about, because I'm fascinated by the way that you dip in and out of Niki's POV from a sound perspective from the film. And I'm curious, like, was that something that was reflected in Daniel's script? Did that just come out of experimentation, in your sound design and on the mix stage, or kind of like, how did you make those decisions about, because sometimes it's very fast and you move back and forth.
Yeah, I think from memory it was alluded to in the script, but it was more worked out. I think, again, Greg, picture editor, was, Greg, Daniel and I spent quite a bit of time working out the exact moment, and the, where we learn the language of that is in the first, where Niki's watching the YouTube video about how to crack a safe. And you kind of think you've been in his point of view hearing already, because the film sounds quite subjective. You're hearing background sounds quite loud, but that's really just actually turns out to be a nod towards the fact that this guy does hear a lot. And then it's only when we see him take the ear defenders off that you realize, oh, everything's gone bright, and wow, wow, that's what that feels like to have a hearing condition, even when there is not a loud sound. So I've never worked on a film before where you are having to demonstrate 3 different ways somebody could hear something. Normally you go into someone's point of view of hearing, and maybe they're deaf or maybe they're not, but it's always that person, and that's the way they hear stuff. But with Niki, it was with no ear defenders, with the small ear defenders, and with the big ear defenders, and all of those had to be demonstrably available to an audience that doesn't have a medical knowledge or a background in sound design kind of thing. So yeah, that was quite complicated to get that right, but I think it worked. Yeah.
I remember I sent you a note because I saw the movie at Telluride Film Festival several months ago, and I sent you a note just of congratulations on the work. But I think probably what I saw in Telluride was a 7.1 mix.
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
The Atmos mix didn't come for a couple of weeks afterwards, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was curious about that because, it's been my experience with directors that, like we're always trying to get people to work in the highest fidelity possible during the original mix to make their creative decisions. So, we always try to encourage people to work in Dolby Atmos and then make your 7.1 or your 5.1 deliverables after that. But in this case, you mixed in 7.1 originally and then came back. And so I heard the Dolby Atmos mix a couple of weeks ago at our screening room in Los Angeles, and I was blown away by it. Almost felt like a different movie to me in a good way. Like the way that you used Atmos to really put us inside Niki's head and give us that experience was just extraordinary. So I'm just curious for what was it like for you and for Daniel, kind of going back in and reopening the mix and having Atmos then and kind of playing with that, because you guys took some remarkably bold swings in the Atmos track.
It was a real joy to have that opportunity, frankly. I mean, sound mixing is a science and an art, and there are many different ways of doing it. And we found that with the Atmos mix, the extra fidelity that you gain around the rears of a room, and gave us the opportunity to lean much harder on mid-range and lower end frequencies in a way that obviously you can't in a normal 5.1, because you can't guarantee that a rear speaker in any theater is going to replay the sound. So we had an opportunity to go to town a bit more, and the more we did, the more we enjoyed it, and the more we kind of turned stuff up. I sat through the end of a screening at the AMC Empire last night, and I heard one of the rear speakers actually rattling as on one of them. I was quite pleased with that.
We always love those moments when we can, make a speaker rattle around in the cabinet. Yeah,
it was hyperacusic.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. We'll send somebody right over. I know that room. That's a good room in New York City.
It's great. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many great Atmos moments in this movie. I was struck, obviously the planes going overhead. But even that scene where Niki's, tuning the piano in the party house, and then he hears the safe crackers drilling upstairs, and they're like, that drill is coming right from the overhead. It was just like, it was a remarkably playful, but accurate and very, very directional and subtle.
Yeah, no, what a treat for a sound designer mixer to have, a very subtle sound coming from upstairs from the ceiling, and to be able to kind of have the opportunity in such a silent, big, echoey stone building to have to coax someone with a hearing condition, up these stairs towards a strange, subtle sound heard in the distance, kind of thing. So yeah, the sound narrative opportunity of that moment was delightful, quite frankly. But yeah, and it's great, the journey that you go from something so quiet to so incredibly loud, in sort of 30 seconds or something.
It's just a fantastic mix. And like I said, I've been wanting to talk with you about this on the podcast since I saw the movie several months ago. And I'm so glad that it's finally coming out in theaters, because I've been talking about this movie now for like 7 or 8 months and encouraging everybody to go see this in a cinema, preferably in Dolby Atmos when you get the chance.
Yeah, it's a great one for sound. I'm so lucky to have had the opportunity to be a part of something that's not only a wonderful film that is, and it's such a sort of great classic movie, isn't it? It just feels like a classically wonderful film. But
well, Johnny, it is always a pleasure to have you on the show to talk about this stuff. And so, congratulations, another great design. And I'm hoping everybody goes to see it in a movie theater as soon as possible.
Yeah, because you should see it in a movie theater, because it really is a film where the experience of a movie theater can take you so much closer to the feeling of what the main character actually has, so it's quite a one-off opportunity in that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Johnny.
Thank you, Glenn.
Many thanks to Leo and Johnny for joining us on the show today, and an extra special thanks to our friends at Black Bear for helping us put this conversation together. Be sure to check out Tuner, now in theaters in Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos where available. We'll have links, as always, in our show notes. And if you'd like even more conversations with artists and filmmakers about how they use technology to tell their stories, be sure you are subscribed to Dolby Creator Talks. You can find links to our show on all the major podcasting platforms, including the video version on YouTube, in our show notes, or you can simply search for Dolby wherever you get your podcasts. If you're curious to know more about what we do at Dolby Creator Lab, head on over to dolbycreatorlab.com. There you'll find information about all of our programs. You can access the entire library of episodes of the show, and you can sign up for our mailing list. Till next time, this is Dolby Creator Talks. I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Our producer and editor is Michael Coleman. Our executive producers are Amanda Schneider and Jack Ferry, with additional editing by Matt Nixon. And our production coordinator is Karen Kahn. Thanks for joining us.